I rise deeply concerned that my colleagues on the other side, in their ideological haze, seem to have lost sight of the real people whose lives will be affected by the choices we make. It seems to me that the Republican budget proposal fails to realize that budgets are not just about numbers. They are about people, their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations for a better life for themselves and their families. Now, we all have a budget. Every family has one. Maybe we don't think of it formally, but we all do. You know, on the revenue side, it's our gainful employment, it's some investments we make, some interest on savings. And on the expenditure side, it's our mortgage payment, the tuition for our children's education, the contributions that we make to our church or synagogue, to a favorite charity who does a good cause. Those are all an expression of our personal values, just as the nation's budget is an expression of our collective values. Now, we may not always think of a budget in those terms, but it is about our values as a country. And we found out last night in upstate New York that the Republican vision of ending Medicare as we know it does not reflect American values, and voters are not buying it. Once again, our Republican colleagues have shown that they're out of touch with the American people and are on the wrong side of history when it comes to what Americans think is fair, what they think is right. Americans don't think it's right to give subsidies to big oil companies, tax breaks to millionaires, and take Medicare away from seniors. They are saying that it's time to abandon the tired refrain of ending Medicare as we know it, which is the Republican proposal. It's time to abandon their ideological agenda that leaves seniors to fend for themselves, because it's not who we are as a people, and it is not what Americans want. This week, I met with a group of seniors in Fort Lee, New Jersey. We discussed what the Republican budget cuts would do to the Medicare system that they have depended on for decades and what those who will come next will depend upon. At that Fort Lee Senior Center, under the Republican plan, a typical 65-year-old would pay an additional $7,000 by 2022. Right now, over 140,000 seniors in New Jersey are impacted by that donut hole, lack of coverage, and prescription drugs. Under the Republican plan, those seniors will pay an additional $80 million for prescription drugs next year, and by 2020, New Jersey seniors currently in that donut hole would pay an additional $1.6 billion. Nationwide, nearly 4 million seniors would pay $2.2 billion more for prescription drugs in 2012 alone under the Republican plan. And by turning Medicaid into a block grant program, the Republican plan could cost America more than 2 million private sector jobs over the next 5 years and threaten our economic recovery. But that's not all. Nationwide, the Republican plan could cut more than $500 billion in Medicaid funding for seniors and the disabled, including life-saving nursing home care, leaving us with the uncomfortable and unanswerable question I pose to my Republican friends. What will those people do? Where will they go? And what happens to them under the Republican budget plan? These are people, not budget numbers. What happens to them? Now, who pays to lower the deficit and who does not on this Republican budget proposal? The answer is clear and simple. Middle-class families pay, seniors pay, but nothing is asked of the wealthiest Americans, and big oil still gets billions in tax breaks. If we were serious about reducing the deficit in a balanced way, we would start with the obvious: subsidies for big oil. The top 5 oil companies earned nearly $1 trillion over the last decade. Passing my bill to repeal oil subsidies would save taxpayers $21 billion over 10 years. We can safely assume oil profits will be much greater in the decade to come with higher oil prices. Well, let's assume the top 5 oil companies only get another $1 trillion in profits over this next decade. Is it too much to ask them to forego $21 billion in profits that they are getting because of the tax cuts we're giving them when oil is trading at $100 a barrel and they produce it for 11? That's the answer to that question is no, Madam President. And so let's do this in a balanced way. We can do much better. We should reject the Republican budget.